Welcome back to another Terranscapes video. I am Mike, and I will be your host for this video. And just a quick mention, I missed last week's video, but I have been pulled away by a variety of things, and I also was pulled away by some non-YouTube Terranscapes work. So that happened, and because I was pulled away by all of those things, I actually haven't done any work on the diorama since I posted the last video. But I put out a call to see if people would like an interview of the miniatures that I purchased. And if you haven't checked the comments, then you missed that there was just a torrent of people asking for the reviews. And if you were checking the comments, you'll notice that not a single person said, "Oh, I'd love to see a review." So I'm doing the review anyway, because I don't want to break momentum on the channel, and I think you'll enjoy it because we don't often get to see, we often don't look, maybe that's a better way to say it, at other miniature companies and the kinds of miniatures that they offer and their quality. So that's the target for today's video, and I hope you find that enjoyable. And just before we go over to the bench, I just want to thank everybody for their continuing comments about ideas about how to construct the wagon wheels. I don't think I've ever worked on something that has drawn so many comments and suggestions. So it's been really interesting because we think it's kind of a simple object, but maybe because of its simplicity, people are seeing it through a variety of eyes. So that's really interesting to me, and I just want to thank everybody for their comments. I do read them, and before I do work on the wheel, which is my first to do after this video, I will be looking at those comments very carefully and taking them into consideration. So thank you very much. So without further ado, let's go over to the bench and take a look at these minis. So I thought I would take a look at them through the quality of their sculpts, the quality of the casting, and then the overall aesthetic appeal of the miniatures taken as a whole, as a group for the miniature line, as well as maybe some comments about the individual models. So let's take a look at some of these miniatures. This miniature is Irene. She is a character from the Steampunk line, carrying a pistol, a little bit of flowers here. So taking a look at the quality of the sculpt really carefully, the flowers have pretty good detail. They seem very reasonable to me. The lines in the feather look good. The overall dress, I think, is fine in terms of its folds. The hands look okay. This hand strikes me as just a little bit small, maybe. Taking a look at her casting quality, we have the parting line here, and that is very, very small. I have not cleaned any of these miniatures up. You can see just a little overlap there. I do not. They've hidden the mold line. They've hidden the mold line along this fold here, and as it comes up, there's a little bit along her hat. I would say this is cast very, very well. Next up, we have Tobias. I gave some of the miniatures a little bit of a wash, so hopefully we can see the detail in a different way, and that might give us a better view of the quality of the detail. He is holding a very steampunk sort of gun with a little bob of, I don't know, air, liquid, whatever. His face, he has a monocle. It's got some nice glasses above the hat. This is one of the things that attracted to me, these miniatures. I saw some other Victorians that did not have true steampunk accents. The quality of his clothing sculpt is fine. It's relatively basic in clothing, and that's something we'll see along the way, which is actually fitting for the time period / style. So I think it's fine because it is appropriate. The buttons, the beard. The beards are a little strong in profile, but that could work depending on how long it is. Taking a look at his casting quality, we can see the parting line here. That's not too bad. Comes up his shoulders. Comes up here. Interesting. It's not hidden by the fold here. And comes across his hat. And the top of his hat shows a little bit of that. I think that's fine casting quality. The next miniature we have is Connie. Connie holding a very similar styled gun. Actually, let's see. Is it the exact gun? Did they reuse that gun? No. Hers has a slightly different design, so that's nice. Again, she also has some goggles on the top. The hair is quality crisp, so it does look like these molds are, not deteriorated. She's got some curls in the back here, which look nice. They're very good quality. She's got some flowers on the back of her hat, which also look good for their size. So I think the overall casting quality on this is pretty good. Looking at her parting line, this is comes up right through here. That's not too bad. Comes across. Let's see if we can find. Okay, so here it comes across her chin right there, and that's not too bad. Her face is okay. That's the way I'm going to classify this one. It's not bad. It seems well proportioned. It looks a little androgynous, perhaps. But I'm going to say it's okay. Not too bad. Actually, a little high cheekbone here. Not too bad. I'd say that's a pretty good face. This is Mina. Now this is part of they've got a vampire theme amongst some of their miniatures as well. So I suspect Mina is actually representing the character from Dracula, at least in theory. She's holding a sword. Again, her hair, nice detail. The cloth looks pretty reasonable as well. She's got a little open back here on her back. This actually is quite a nice face. If you can see, her eyes are, she's got her brow furrowed in an angry look, and I think that actually comes across pretty well in that sculpt and her cheekbone. So actually, that's a pretty nice face as well. Looking at her casting, they have the mold part coming up along the ridge of this fold here, which is nice because it gives you an easy access if you want to grind that down. And what's nice is, and this I have noticed on a few, that the parting line that comes across her top of her head is completely, really absent. I don't see a parting line coming across anywhere on the top of her head, and that's a really nice feature because sometimes getting those parting lines out of hair can be particularly difficult. So this is Tobias. And he's got goggles he's wearing, which I like because I won't have to sculpt goggles onto his face. I like his portliness. I think he's got a pretty good proportion on that. So he has a four-barreled pistol, which I like. I can't remember the name of that kind of a pistol. Oh, a Derringer, right? They used to have little four-barreled Derringers. This is a little big for that, but nice callback to that kind of a gun. So taking a look at his parting line, very small. So these miniatures, for the most part, are really well cast. I've been really impressed with that. Going across his head, right? This is a very, very small profile. That's going to be very easy to shave off. Little bow tie. I think the sculpt is actually quite nice. I think it's done quite well, and coupled with the casting, that's going to be an easy miniature and an enjoyable miniature to paint. And this is one of their multi-miniature packs. These are Victorian Hunters, and they're armed with single-barreled rifles and a couple shotguns. These vary a little bit more in quality, and because they're not characters, I think a little bit less time has been paid attention to a couple of them. I'll show you let's take a look at the worst one, I think. This face is not great. This is got the eyes are kind of weird. The mouth is a little weird. The chin, it just, doesn't look very realistic. And I think you can even see it, a little along here. The hair is not detailed all the way up to the cap. And the rifle is pretty much unadorned. It's just a basic stock and an unimproved barrel, and there's no sight at the end or anything like that. So the rifle really doesn't have much detail to offer. The hands are a little bit larger, and these, I don't know, the head and the hands, I'm not an anatomy expert. I will get better at it as time goes on, but I do think some of the miniatures' hands are a little too small, and certainly, let's see, just to give you a little bit of a comparison, right, here, the hand is quite small, and here his hand is quite large. So a little variation there. Of course, you know me, I'm going to be picky about my evaluation. And taking a look at another one of the Victorian Hunters, the face here is really not great. These lips are really distorted, and his ear, it's not a great join. I don't know. These are not great faces. The overall rifle quality is, again, it's pretty much basic. It's just the stock and the barrels. There's not, I don't know if there would be any extra detail, but I feel like some is probably on some guns that might not be represented. The casting quality is actually relatively good for the most part. Here's the parting line. It comes up over his sleeve, and oh, that's my cat. When he comes in from the outside, he tells me he's here. And then that runs up along the barrel, and actually that's a really nice tight parting line there. Runs across his hat. There's a little bit of flash on the inside of his leg, but this is easy cleanup work. And looking at one more of the Hunters, here he has a monocle, giving a little bit of a steampunk feel. I like that. This is probably the best miniature out of the Victorian Hunters, because now you can see some of that detail on the rifle that's missing on the others. We have the trigger guard, we have a band here, we even have a sight at the tip of the rifle, we have the stock extend, another band there. So this gun looks much more interesting, much more realistic. His face is better proportioned. And here we have a group of civilians. These are described as upper class civilians, and they have enhanced details to reflect that upper class status. Of course, a little more time has been given to these miniatures. So here, I think the face, I don't know, it's something around the eyes, the bottom of the eyes. It's just not, it's not great. Now, again, I'm being pretty picky. How much will you see when you paint it depends on the quality of your painting skills. His sideburns are a little aggressive in size. I like these buttons because they're actually a little bit recessed rather than too far proud, which I think may be a common problem sometimes when people do buttons. And the mold line, I mean, I have a hard time even seeing it on some parts on this miniature. Comes across here, comes over to his hat, and there's a little bit, I won't be able to show it with this field of focus, there's a little bit of a ridge under his hat, but this is one of the easier areas to grind down. Taking a look at one of the other upper class citizens, this one is the one that struck me the most. I think his profile just seems pretty flat, and a lot of historical miniatures back in the day would have somewhat flat profiles. In fact, way back in the day, they were flat. But that's one of the few profile problems that I've seen on these miniatures. And I wonder about this miniature. I don't know, it just strikes me as something's wrong. The cloth here in the leg looks a little wrong. Maybe like his pants are baggy. I'm not sure. And the creases in it, you know, this has got a flat kind of creased edge that doesn't really seem well sculpted. There's a little bit of a gap here under his arm for the parting line. That will take a little bit more to fix. I liked him holding his hat. That was one of the reasons why I was interested in picking him for this project. So he could be like leaning back, holding his hat as if it was going to blow off. And I have selected him to be included in it. Just before I move on to the aesthetics of the models, I do want to point out that the bases are pretty varied and sometimes quite poorly cast. So I had to do quite a bit of grinding to get this lady to stand up. And some of the smaller bases, like this one, I hadn't fixed yet. And you can see the deformation there. And some of the bases are exceptionally thick in contrast to some that are exceptionally thin. So I think the bases are some of the biggest problems for consistency. I had to grind this one down extensively to get him to stand up, for instance. But depending on your usage and the way you are planning to integrate them into your gaming, then you might be basing them anyway, and that kind of instability, shall we say, is not going to be a problem. So what do I think about them aesthetically as a group overall? I like them. I like the characters a lot, but let's look at the town people here real quick, the civilians. This guy's great. This guy's fairly good. And I think the detail on this woman is really nice. I like her overall. However, oh, she even has, I didn't really notice that, a little bit of a ponytail here in the back. That's nice with the little ribbon. Oh, I didn't miss that. She's got a little bow in her hat. See, that's nice. See, these details are really, I like them. However, I feel like she looks kind of like an old lady. Somehow her posing, it looks a little, I think it's a little hunched maybe. It's slight. But on this miniature, I think, feels like an older woman than, say, a young escort, and that's not necessarily a problem if you want some variety of ages, which typically actually a lot of miniatures don't offer. But it just kind of struck me as connoting an age, and I don't know, I've never thought about that with miniatures before, so I just wanted to really mention that with these two. And taking a look at the characters, I think they tie together well. Mina is a little bit off from some of the other more steampunk-driven costumes, but I think that's okay. Sometimes the costuming on steampunk characters is so exaggerated that you feel like everybody has to be like that. But some people are going to wear something a little simpler. So I feel like this is appropriate and works well. This is a nice, modest combination with the goggles and his normal coat. I think that kind of gives a nice variety compared to the more eccentric characters in terms of their attire. I forgot to mention with this character that there is a problem with the casting. In the back here, the detail is lost on these flowers and kind of muddy in between her shoulder here and the join with the flowers. And there's like a little, there's a little ridge in here that doesn't quite work. So that's one of the only real problems amongst these miniatures that I've noticed. I think the miniatures, in terms of their unity of look, perhaps is a little, maybe I'm being unfair, maybe the most disjointed between the hunters. These hunters are not bad, and I think they work well. His little bushy mustache works well, and of course he's got his monocle. He's got a little bit of a grimace in his face, so that's nice. But when you bring in these two hunters in particular, they just seem to fall out of line with the sort of range. This one is just, this is a pretty bad miniature in my opinion. He's not quite so bad. You got to do some fixing on his face. I kind of like the scarf, but I'm not sure why, but I just feel like he looks maybe a little too generic. And, with the time they spent on this miniature to kind of jazz him up, it makes these two miniatures really lack and kind of show them as maybe a little too plain compared to the care that's been taken in the other miniatures in the range. So I thought I would give you a little look at the Ironclad miniature site very briefly, just to show you some of the range that they offer and some of the other items that they sell as well. So they offer terrain. Let's take a look at the 28 mil just for a quick second. And they're offering pretty much tradition. My wife is doing some cleaning upstairs and I can't take the time to record around her. So if you hear noises associated with cleaning upstairs, that's what that is. They offer mostly military time period terrain pieces. So they have field positions. And what's interesting is they also have trenches. Way back in the past, I painted a set of these trenches. And I can't remember when. It was a long time ago. If you go into my back catalog, maybe you'll discover them. But I remember them being pretty high quality in terms of their casting. So anyway, that's one of their offerings in the 28 millimeter range. Here is the Victorian Sci-Fi section. And they have, so you can see here that they include a horror element range. Of interest, they offer a cephalopod alien race. And those are kind of fun miniatures. I never thought about these being modified for Cthulhu. Huh. All right. Made a mental note of that. And they only have 3 models within this range, but just to give you a quick peek in case you're looking for something like that. And the only other page here that I think might interest many of you, or more than some, are their steam tank range. And surprisingly, they have quite a few tanks available. And I could see these being either modified or fitting into other kinds of games, not too much difficulty if you like a stylized look, especially if you're into scratch builds. The armored tractor is kind of fun looking. The 4-legged steam walker give you a sense of what some of the components of that include. Moving down a little more, these are kind of interesting models, sort of Jules Verne-ish. Made me right away want to create a diorama just so I can include this miniature in it. I just love that kind of look. It's very, like I said, very Jules Verne. And when I was originally looking at thinking about a vehicle for my diorama, I had fallen in love with this walker, actually. And it can hold quite a few miniatures. It's actually relatively large. Another look at that. It's 120 mils by 100 mils by 85. So this is a relatively large model, and just kind of caught my eye. And of course, in the end, I'm not going to use it, but it drew me nevertheless to the line. And for the last model, just to give you a quick peek, and they have a little steam rotocopter here as well. So some fun models in here. Something if you wanted to customize some of your armies and you're looking for something like this, this is a good place to come and browse, especially for their tanks. Very fun range to look at. So having taken a look at those minis, I think they offer fair value for their price. They are priced well below a lot of miniatures that are out there that we're used to, and I think the quality of sculpts are high enough that it makes them a decent value. I also thought it was nice that they offer non-combat miniatures. So often in many ranges, like I looked at weird miniatures and I wanted to look at their because they have a very steampunk theme, and all of their miniatures are so dynamically posed and in combat oriented motif that it's very hard to think of integrating them, or certainly having bystanders on the street, that sort of idea. And looking at Raper miniatures, they offer a few in a steampunk theme, and some of them are very nice sculpts and are not at a lot higher of a price range than the ones at Ironclad, but they don't have a wide enough range to collect enough variety for a diorama like this. And because they are manufactured by, or I should say designed by a variety of artists, and even over quite a span of time, and if you follow one particular artist and you follow all the miniatures that they've created, you'll see how they've improved over time. So there's not any real consistency amongst the range, and in fact they can even have quite a bit of variety between the scales of their miniatures that they're offering. So it's just not a very good source for miniatures for this kind of a project. And so having companies like Ironclad Miniatures out there where you can get a unified set of miniatures provides a valued resource for doing this kind of work. So I hope you enjoyed a video that's a little bit off of the beaten path, but after all, I too am a person who wanders from the path, or perhaps lives on that other path every day. So it's something a little different. I hope you enjoyed that. If you want to support this channel and you want to keep videos coming on the channel, you can become a supporter on Patreon. And by pledging just $1 a month, you can get access to all of the unique content that I put up on Patreon. I just did a major review of all of the available hotwire tables that are out there, as well as tips and ideas for constructing your own. That's a rather lengthy post that I made going into the monthly column section, but I'm checking in with my patrons about exactly how to classify it. But that's the kind of extra content that you can get there. And don't forget that this channel, that's its only income. I don't have sponsors. I don't put up advertisements for you to have to click through. So if you value this content and you want to see it continue, it's by support through viewers like you that makes that happen. And I mentioned in the last vid that I was going to do some changes on my Patreon page, and I haven't yet. That reminds me that when I was a middle school teacher, I learned relatively quickly never to say what I'm going to do, because as a teacher, you're adapting your schedule quite on the fly regularly, and those kids would never let you forget that you said you were going to do X on Tuesday. So I have to remember not to do that on my channel either, because I don't know, my schedule changes, my priorities change. I'm like, I got to work on this today. So I'm going to make some changes on my Patreon page. They're going to happen soon, and we'll leave it at that. So thank you once again for joining me. I really appreciate you taking a small slice of your day and stepping into the YouTube world to join me and taking a look at these miniatures or the other things that I'm posting. And next week, I will be doing my very best to come back with work on the wheel. But this weekend, I have a tournament for my gaming club. We host a miniature wargaming tournament for Kings of War, and we do that every year, and it spans the Friday through Sunday time period. It's usually a very good time, but that's a thing I have to work around this week. So hopefully, at the very least, I'll have the damn wagon wheel done, because I know so many people are interested in seeing how I finally solved that problem. So I'm going to say that that's the goal. And if you want to see the wagon wheel and the other advances I may or may not make between now and then, well, I hope you will come back and see that video, because you know that I will be back soon with another Terranscapes video.